All right, let's get going here. Thanks everyone for joining us for Feature Friday. I'm really excited to present this new envelope feature to you all today. Before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. We've got a good group today, so if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the meeting chat. I'll be watching that as I go. And if we have time at the end, I can open up for open questions if you want to unmute and ask a question at that time. If you would like to follow along with us, everything I'm going to show today, except for one sneak peek at the end, is available in the app now. So feel free to pull up Giraffe on your side monitor and work along with us. And with that being said, let's dive right in here. So today we're going to talk about modeling the allowable built envelope for your site or for a larger planning initiative. Bonnie, I see your question about will the video be shared? We upload all of our webinars to YouTube, so you should see that posted to our YouTube channel soon next week. Great. So the allowable built envelope, as you know, most people are aware within real estate, it's the three-dimensional space in which you can legally construct something. And that's determined by zoning constraints like setbacks, step backs, height restrictions, sight lines, overlays. All kinds of things go into those requirements that determine what the allowable built area is. Our tool helps you to model that in 3D space. You can visualize it more easily, and you can use that in a variety of ways. So I want to dive right in here into Giraffe and just start looking at our tool. And the tool is, if you are familiar with Giraffe, it is one of our generative transforms. So it's really easy to apply in any of your projects. You don't have to add an additional app or extension. It's just right there in Giraffe as you go. And I'm just going to start today with a big old rectangle just to use this as our example. You could start with your site boundary. You could start with a rectangle like I did today, or any shape really, and start applying your envelope settings to that. Once I have this rectangle, I'll notice over here in my properties palette that I have this button that says Open Flow Builder. And that's where all of our generative transforms live. Basically, a transform in Giraffe allows you to take a very simple shape like this rectangle and apply pre-built algorithms to it to make it more complex. There's lots of different options. We have an apartment algorithm, we have a subdivision algorithm, we have structural columns, and then what we're focusing on today is that envelope algorithm. So I'll just scroll down here. Envelope is down here at the bottom. And as soon as I apply it, it comes with some sort of pre-built settings. And you can see that it took that shape already and made it much more complex. What it chooses by default is probably not what you're looking for, and that's okay because it's very easy to edit. So you'll notice now that we've added a transform, we have this new section in our properties palette for generated features. The output of your generated features is what shows on the map. So if I want to edit settings about that, I can just click into that section of properties. And what I want to edit here are the settings in the envelope transform. So I'm going to open that up. And you'll see once I do that, oh boy, we get a lot of settings here. Very exciting. I am going to start by making this the simplest version possible so we can see exactly what's happening as I change things. I always like to start sort of in the order that is shown in the UI here. So I'd like to determine what my maximum height is first. And obviously determining your max height from the zoning code is different than just typing it in a box. Like I can't just decide I want to build something that's 100 feet tall here if that's not allowed by the zoning code. So the first step really when establishing your building envelope is doing a little research in your local zoning and finding what that maximum height and what your setback requirements are. Right now, this tool does not read from any zoning code. It's very difficult to parse that information globally. So we like to make sure that a human brain takes a look at it before the app does, because honestly, computers are kind of stupid. It might make an assumption that isn't true based on multitudes of overlays and different restrictions. And, even if you're doing some negotiations with airspace, all of that you can take into consideration and have that information known so that you can input those values. Today, I'm just going to say that our max height is 45 feet. As soon as I do that, you'll see that the shape has adjusted. So this is all going to go live as we go, which is really cool. You'll see everything instantly. There's also some options here to show the building levels if you wish. So maybe I can say typical is a 10-foot building level, and then you can kind of get a quick preview of how many levels might fit here. I'm going to leave that off for now, but that is an option. And then the meat of our project is right here in this section where we're defining our setbacks and our heights. You'll see that there's 3 different tabs here: front, rear, and side. Right now you can establish 3 different combinations of setbacks and height requirements and then apply those to different sides of the model. Later on in the presentation, I'll show you a quick preview of what's coming in version 2 of the envelope tool. And I think anyone with complex sites that have multiple frontages will be very excited about that. So we'll get to that later. But the first thing I'm going to do here is just start establishing the known parameters. I'm making up numbers today, but pretend I know from the zoning code that there is a setback, an initial setback from the front of the site required of 15 feet here. That initial setback can't have anything built, so the height of that setback is 0. There just has to be flat ground 15 feet back. When I do that, you can see that it takes that 15-foot setback from the front of the site and just moves the allowable envelope over in that space. But this setback might not be the only requirement of this building envelope. I might have additional requirements as I go higher up in the building. For instance, my building might be allowed to be about 25 feet tall at that 15-foot setback. But maybe once I get beyond that 15-foot setback, I have to start sloping back. And that slope, maybe it needs to be about, let's say, it has to slope back to that 45 degree angle there. So just by putting in those heights and setbacks, I instantly get a read on this model of what those requirements are. If I pull up this little visual for you, it might be a little bit easier to understand. So those heights that I put in, coordinated obviously with what gets generated in the model. But if you see here, in this particular example, the setback was set to 20 feet with a 0 height. If you see this green setback here, that's indicating that 20-foot setback with 0 height. Then the next level here is you are allowed to build up 25 feet at that 20-foot setback level. So the setback remains the same, but the height allowed here is 25 feet up at a 20-foot setback. And then this one starts stepping back after that in this angled. So here the setback is 250 feet back from the front of the site. you're allowed to go to the max height of this building, which is 50 feet. So that generates that angled back condition by taking, sort of the difference of these two in a triangulation. So, being able to visualize this right now is a little bit difficult, and that's why you'll all be very excited about the next iteration. But it is possible to create very complex envelope conditions using these settings. If I jump back into the model here, I have only set my front, but I can set different conditions on the other sides as well. So maybe my rear also has a smaller setback, maybe only 5 feet. And I have selected from this visual which side is the rear. So I can do that dynamically as I go, just by clicking select on that graphic, and that helps me visualize what I'm doing. And then maybe this one has, no sort of angled requirements. It's just a basic 5-foot setback. So pretty easy to get that established. Once you have this envelope, you can adjust it just like any other shape in Giraffe. So you can just push and pull, change the size if you need to. Before I go on, are there any questions about that? Feel free to drop them in the meeting chat as we go. Just don't want to leave anyone behind. Sarah's asking, how did I get to the envelope tool? So initially you will have a shape, it'll be selected, and it's a generative transform. So you're going to click Open Flow Builder, and then just scroll down to the envelope transform and add it. Once you add the envelope transform, you get to the settings by clicking into the features that were generated by that transform that you added. Perfect. Okay, so we've looked a little bit at the basics here. I showed, Bonnie will look at saving a project in just a second. So great thought. Hold on. We'll do that in the next portion of the demo. So this envelope, I showed changing which sides had which settings assigned from this visual. You can also do it using the edit mode, which is this toggle here, or the shortcut Shift A on your keyboard. And that gives you this handy little toggle where it's very visual on the map. And I can just click on each of those points and say, actually, this side gets the front requirements as well. So that's a nice tip for doing some quick edits if you're more visual in the way that your brain works. And then the other thing that's really cool, I think, about the envelope transform is if you are super early in your feasibility exploration, or if you are a city planner doing sort of large scale massing studies, you can actually automatically fill this envelope with different Giraffe usages. So if I click on usage fills enabled, it's going to automatically add me a mix of however many usages I want to include in this envelope. And it will fill in a way that it only gives you the allowed amount that will fit with inside that envelope. So here I might change my retail floor to floor. By default, it's using the default usage floor to floor heights, but I can adjust those here if I wanted to. And I can also adjust the mix. So maybe I only want a quarter retail and more residential. And as I do that, it dynamically updates this building envelope. If I had a site boundary established, I would also instantly get those classic Giraffe calculations in my urban tab. So perhaps I don't want residential. I actually want to change this out, and I want it to be a mix of retail and commercial. So I can just come down to my list of usages and find that commercial use. There it is. And now that, amount has changed from residential to commercial, and all of my metrics here update as well. So this is really cool if you are trying to just plop down some general use cases. You have an idea in your head of how much square footage would make a project work for you. If you put in that allowable envelope and then see how much of that usage could fit, very quickly you're understanding if this site is even worth doing a more detailed study upon. So let's take that idea to the next level here. And I actually have a project that I pre-built that is a little zoning study in the city of Murfreesboro in Tennessee. They're having sort of a renaissance there where there's a lot of zoning change happening and a lot of new construction. It's a very exciting little small town, big changes, I would say. So I wanted to take a little look at the effects of what those changes might mean to the folks living in this town. So what I did is I modeled up sort of using the envelope tool what the existing sort of downtown kind of looks like. It's mostly single story, some two story, mostly retail and commercial, with a very small amount of residential units. So people will drive downtown to go to restaurants and things, but there aren't a lot of people living there. And the city actually has a goal of adding hundreds and hundreds of housing units to their downtown area to sort of bring that revival, to make it more active, to make it more fun for people to live there. So what I did is I modeled up a few different use scenarios using the envelope tool, some medium density and some low density, and different mixes. So some office and resi, some retail and resi, some all office, all kinds of different options here. And I took a look at what might happen if instead of what's kind of existing, we applied some of those upzoning options to this region. And when you do that, you get a obviously much denser town center, but it still feels like Main Street America. I made sure to include step backs that if you're at ground level, it doesn't feel like you're being overwhelmed by the buildings. But still, adding those hundreds of units that the town was looking for. And then I did a little study in analytics where I'm comparing the original to the new proposed. To be fair, the proposed is just something I made up based on the general idea of what the town is doing. But this is something as a town planner, it could be very interesting to do this kind of study to get a visual of what those policies might mean to the people on the street. And beyond that, you get also the math behind it. So you can compare what the original, building area was to what the new could be. You can compare the original amount of dwelling units. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here so that maybe we can see it a little bit better. You can compare the number of units. You can see I added almost 450 units here. And you can see density. So comparing the area to the new area, I must have a calculation error here. Available I'll have to take a look at that different later, because obviously the new zoning is much more dense. But anyway, and then the unit density especially tells the story here. Like the number of people who could live here before, there's only 2.39 units per acre, whereas now in the new zoning you can have 45 units per acre. So it can be much more dense, much more populated. So I think this is a really cool use case for the envelope tool and using that generative fill option. Now to get to what Bonnie was asking about, I'm going to take off my town planner hat and put on my developer hat. Okay, so the town said, here's our new plan. You're allowed to build much denser development here now, and I want to come in and build something. But I have sort of a typical product or something that I know has been successful in this type of demographic before, and I want to see if that's going to make sense in this site that's available. So I'm looking at this site here that has this new available buildable envelope that's pretty large compared to what's existing. There's like a little tiny commercial building with a lot of parking lot there currently. And I want to take a look at if my building will fit there. So what I'm going to do is create a new project from this parcel. So I'm just right clicking on, I have the Murfreesboro parcels layer in my project. So I'm just right clicking on that parcel and I'm going to do create. Oops, I'm on an invisible layer. Actually, what I'm going to do is copy this. I'm just doing Control-C to copy that to clipboard, and I'm going to do new project. So I'm just going to create a new project. If my internet will keep up with me, cross your fingers. And then I'm going to add in that parcels layer again, because I didn't save it as a template. So there's my parcel layer. And now I'm going to grab this parcel and I'm going to set it as the project boundary. So that's my project boundary. And now I can just save this project. I'm going to call it Murfreesboro Envelope Study. Save that project. And just jump into that project here. And once this loads up, I'm going to drop that envelope that I copied from the planning study into my new project. There we go. I'm going to take my 3D buildings down just so I can see a little bit better what's going on. Drop that parcel, drop that envelope in. And I'm just going to turn off the usage fills because all I want is that generic envelope for my purposes. And then I'm going to add a new layer here that's for my study and actually create my study on there. Make this a little bit transparent so I can kind of see through it. And then what I did before, because I like efficiency as a developer who's testing lots of sites, is I created a design library of my most used projects. So now I can just open up that design library and drop a building that I've already designed and already put all of my metrics into right onto the project. So I'm just going to add this project. I'm going to replace the usages so that I get all of my assumptions. And I'm going to put it on the study layer. Great. So now I can see, oh boy, it's exactly the right height. I did not do that on purpose, folks, so that's just very lucky. And now I'm going to rotate this building and see if it fits within the allowable envelope that I have available to me here. So I'm going to just sort of drop this into the center of the project. go to my 3D view and see that it sticks out a little bit here on the end, but for the most part, I'm pretty good. So I might just have to make that a little bit shorter, just a tiny bit, so that it fits inside that envelope. But all of my work is basically done for me already. I don't have to be messing around with drawing something brand new. I'm bringing in a project that I already know works pretty well, and just sort of adjusting it to work within this new site's constraints. I also know that the folks here in Murfreesboro really like their parking, so I'm actually going to add a little multi-deck parking structure underneath this building. Make sure it stacks on the bottom here. And that does take my building up a little bit too high, but that's okay. I can just drop the levels down, and now everything fits. So I can see how many units might fit here. And if I was being really efficient, I probably built out my, rental pro forma already. And I know exactly what my cost to build and what my returns might be. I'm going to bring in a template here and pull up my for rent feasibility. So I get my, instantly my stabilized return on cost, my cost per dwelling, which is way too high because this was optimized. The costs in my template were optimized for metric, so it's an order of magnitude too high. But of course, you are a smart person and you would have your template set up for the correct units of measure. But I honestly did that study in about, 5 minutes here. And I know instantly whether it's worth taking to the next level or not. So really excited about the potential of this envelope tool for accelerating your workflows. Before I show a preview of version 2 of the envelope tool, I just want to pause and make sure we don't have any more questions. So please feel free to drop questions in the meeting chat if you thought of anything while we were looking at that together. If not, I will just jump quickly over to our dev branch here. Great. So, new envelope incoming. It is still a generative transform, so you will get to it the same way that you do today, where you, create a polygon, add the generative transform. But what's new is once you jump into those envelope settings, is you're going to have, first of all, more options. So historically, right now, you only have the availability of doing a front, side, and rear on your envelope. But what happens if you've got a site that is not very regular and maybe it has multiple different requirements depending on what roads and frontages it has? Well, now you can add additional frontages and you can also name them. So maybe you want to name it actually Old Windsor Road, because that road has a specific requirement. Then it is much easier to track sort of what is being controlled by what part of the zoning ordinance. Once you add that section, you can also add your setbacks and levels in a much more visual way. So I can add a setback just by adding additional points on this UI, and it's pretty small in my computer because I have a very high-res screen here. So let me just zoom in a little bit, hopefully. There we go. Then you might be able to see a little bit better. So what I can do here is get really granular with these setback requirements, which is something that might happen a lot in your project. So, angles, heights, etc., based on any of your requirements there. And then just like before, I can sort of control which ones get which settings. So I have Old Windsor Road on every side right now. That's not correct, so I can change these up just like before. But I'm really excited about that next iteration of the envelope tool, because you're going to have that very easy to understand visual to help you control where your setbacks and stepbacks are coming from in that UI. So pretty cool. You've still got your usage fills available. You've still got edit mode, but with the addition of being able to add as many sides as you want, establish those sides, and have that new UI to look at. So with that, that is my presentation today. I was really excited to show you what we've got today. That was the majority of the presentation, so you can jump right into Giraffe now, try it out, play around. But coming very soon are these new improvements to the user interface. So